Good evening, everyone. This is Shelby Tuck Horton, I'm not the director anymore. I'm vice president of education. And I am delighted to have Sally Conan here with us. Sally knows all about wedding gowns, and she's going to help you to be able to fix those dresses that have a problem. Like she's going to give you some quick fixes so that your bride won't be stressing out on her wedding day. She is the guru of wedding gowns. I'm going to let her introduce herself. I am going to mute myself and let her take over. Now, she said she doesn't mind you asking questions during the presentation, but I'm going to ask that you put your question in the chat, and then when she gets to a place that seems like we can interrupt her, then we will do that with your questions. So I am going to turn it now over to Sally.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure to get ready for this. And I guess I should tell you that I have a very checkered past. I actually have a PhD in the history of art. And years ago in 1990, when the economy was terrible, my husband, who at that time was executive vice president of a very large bank, and I both lost our jobs within 3 days of each other. And we looked at each other and said, how shall we eat? And he was very entrepreneurial, and he discovered that there was a laundromat for sale and that we should buy the laundromat. So we did. And we looked around and we said, gosh, this is back in 1990, remember? They charge $89.95 here to clean and preserve wedding gowns. That's a lot of money. It's a lot better than charging $2.95 for a sweater or a skirt. So we decided to focus on gowns, and we were such babies, we didn't know anything. But we persevered, and when we sold the business about 2 years ago, we were doing 3,000 gowns a year. And in fact, that was all we did. The laundromat had long since been shuttered, and all we did was wedding gowns. So I've had lots of practice cleaning, and I really don't mind if you interrupt me at any time. That's perfectly okay. And I will go bravely on. So I think before I really begin, I would like to say that I think keeping the wedding gown safe until the wedding day is important. And you probably should encourage your bride to keep it not necessarily in the garment bag, because if it's a very large bag, the garment bag will be so small that it will crease the wedding dress. Oftentimes, putting the dress in between two fitted sheets and pinning the sheets together is a good way to solve that problem of having a dress that's so large the garment bag is squashing it. So, and also it should have a bust form in it. If it didn't come with a bust form, you can use tissue to stuff it so that the bodice doesn't sag. And you can also use tissue in case you have to keep it in the garment bag. Wherever you fold the skirt, use a lot of tissue to buffer the folds so that when you actually get to the venue where the wedding is going to take place, it's in pretty good shape. It can take an hour or two to do a good job pressing a wedding gown. So you don't have that kind of time on a wedding day. The idea would be that the dress arrives at the venue in as good a shape as possible. So as far as emergencies, if you Google things to have on hand for wedding gown emergencies, pretty much the same thing comes up over and over. Usually there are 5 basic things: a powder, a stain remover, a mini sewing kit, safety pins, and body tape are the suggestions. The basics may vary slightly, but that's about it unless the list goes on to include things that are for the bride's use, and such as aspirin. In fact, the lists for brides are very extensive. They can be 25 or 35 things that she should have for emergencies. Those lists are fine for the bride, who hopefully is getting married just once, but they are not good enough for you. You're the professional, and there will be at least one emergency, and sometimes many more than one, requiring a quick fix at every wedding that you plan. The same kinds of things are going to happen over and over again. So you need to know not only what to have on hand, but how to use what you have in the best way possible. You, as a professional, should add to the list scissors, which are always useful, buttons, a lint roller, Q-tips, a soft cloth, such as a washcloth or two, and a steamer to the basic list of 4 or 5 things to have on hand. And let me say here, the conservation of works of art, much like the conservation of works of art, whatever you should do on the day of the wedding to the wedding dress should be reversible, because the gown is very precious to the bride. Reversible means that you can undo it. That is, if you have pinned it with a safety pin, you can unpin the pin. If you stitch it, you can remove the stitches. If you use a stain remover, be sure to test it on an inside seam where the result will not show. And do not use the chemical if it changes the color of the fabric in any way. The goal is to solve the problem without causing a permanent change. If you can't do something without causing a permanent change, then think twice. Is the problem really that important, or is it something that you can let go until after the wedding? Beginning with the list, let's look at the use of a steamer. I hope that you can see, on my screen, there's a little sign that says this meeting is being recorded, so I'm not sure what you can, there we go. This is something called an E-Steam Jiffy steamer. And there are lots of different steamers on the market, but this one is very tough. It's easy to fill. You put about a cup of water in it. It takes 2 or 3 minutes for it to heat up. And the other thing you should do with it is cover it. My screen is so limited, I can't really see what you can see, but let's try this. Always cover the head of the steamer, whether it's a portable steamer or it's a great big steamer on wheels like we have in professional settings. Cover the head of the steamer with a sock. Steamers are really helpful if the petticoat underneath the dress is bent out of shape or there are creases in the gown itself. But when you use the steamer, and here the holes are right here, so the steam can come out from the fabric. This is kind of a big.
It up just a little bit. Okay.
That work? Here's the sock. There are the holes right there. The steam is coming out through these holes. And this sock is a little big, but you can figure out one that will work for you. You can also use a washcloth and hold it in place with a rubber band. But it's useful to straighten out the petticoat or creases in the gown. And the other thing you want to do is always put the steamer under the fabric like this, so that the fabric is over the head of the steamer. That means that the weight of the fabric itself is going to help you smooth out the wrinkles. Steam is also useful when you're removing stains, which I'll mention later. This E-Steam comes in black, pink, and white. If you Google it, you will see the price ranges from $80 to $100, but it's worth it. Excuse me. The Jiffy E-Steam, and that's Jiffy, that's the company that makes them, and you can buy them directly from the company. It's very sturdy, and it's very easily packed, so you can use it for your personal things as well as at wedding. I've had mine for years and years, and I dropped it about a dozen times, and it's very sturdy and keeps holding up. One of the problems, as I said, with steamers is that the temperature can change when you're using them, so that's why I put a sock over it, because if the temperature changes, the steamer will spit, and then you have water spots on silk. The sock absorbs the water, and on a silk gown, the steamer may make a damp spot, but it will eventually dry without leaving a ring. On poly, you don't have to worry. In fact, you wouldn't have to worry if the steamer spit on poly, but silk is a problem. The use for buttons is obvious. You can buy 10 wedding gown buttons with plastic backs for less than $1 at Temu. That's T as in Tom. Excuse me. E as in Edward, M as in Mary, U.com, TEMU.com. Sorry. Or 10 of them with fabric backs for $7 on Etsy. They may not be a perfect match for the buttons on the gown, but they will do in an emergency. You can also find Q-tips online in a package of 30 on eBay. A damp Q-tip can work wonders on small stains, and 30 are more than you will ever need at one time. It's much easier to carry around a package of 30 than a few loose ones or one of those big boxes. And as you use them from the package of 30, you can replace the ones you use with some others from that big box. As for lint rollers, miniature sizes are available online at a number of places. You might also consider buying miniature ones that you can customize with your brand and leave behind as a promotion. Much like the E-Steam, the lint rollers work on both polyester or silk gowns with no problem. There's also a kind of lint roller that's plastic, and you've probably seen those. When they collect hair and lint, instead of tearing off the page, a sheet from the lint roller, you just hold it under running water and it washes away the lint and the hair. I don't happen to like that kind, but they are useful. And of course, you don't have to keep buying lint rollers. It goes on forever. The use for safety pins, a sewing kit, and body tape is pretty straightforward. And sometimes they're the only things you can use to hide a problem. I once had a phone call from a tearful bride whose silk gown had been hanging in a closet with a roof leak. In fact, you would know her. She was the daughter of the original owners of the Association of Bridal Consultants. Do you remember?
Mhm.
And of course, it was a tragedy because since her mother and father were wedding planners and official ones, it was a tragedy beyond belief that her dress was not perfect condition. So they drove it down straight. I don't know how they got here so fast. It's about 5 hours really, but instead they just were here in a minute. And I worked on it literally all night trying to get the stain out. But even after dry cleaning, there was still a pale stain that was about an inch wide and 8 inches long. Luckily, the skirt had soft pleats, and we hand sewed a pleat very loosely so that it was not obvious, just enough to hold the area together to hide the gown. So the point is that, you don't necessarily have to be worried about a stain. There are other things that happen that you need to have a solution for, and they may range all over the place. You could also, in terms of masking something, you can try having the bride holding her bouquet over a stain, at least until she goes down the aisle and back. In fact, I can imagine you could pin a flower on the gown to hide the stain, which might even start a new fashion. Once the ceremony and the photos are over, a smile is the bride's best ally because everyone will be looking at her rather than for a stain or a rip in her gown. It's hard for the bride to appreciate, but it's true. If a balky zipper is the problem, find a pencil or the nearest bathroom where there's a bar of soap and try rubbing the pencil or a little of the soap onto the zipper teeth. If that does not work, you may have to sew the bride into her gown. And there's an interesting little gadget called a micro stitch micro fastener that you can find online. It looks like a little gun, and you can use it for all kinds of things. Quick clothing fixes for larger areas that would be difficult to close with an ordinary needle and thread. Do practice with it before you try to solve a zipper problem or any other problem on the wedding day. And that's true of all these suggestions for quick fixes. If you practice, you will know what to expect and you'll be more confident when something does happen. And if it can happen, as you well know, it will. With regard to stains, there are two basic things to know that will help you do the right thing in an emergency that involves a stain. One is the fiber of the gown, whether it's a natural fiber such as silk or an artificial fiber. And two is the type of stain, whether it's a wet side or dry side stain or a combination of both. As far as the wedding gown itself, if I had to guess, and I do because I could not find anything online that would tell me how many gowns are silk and how many gowns are polyester or some other artificial fiber, I would guess that about 3/4 of the gowns that are worn and about 1/4 are silk. So the odds are that you'd be working with a polyester dress rather than a silk one. But if you need to be certain you know the fiber of the bride's gown, you need to double check. And I'm not talking about the weave of the fabric. Fiber is different than weave. The way the fiber is woven determines the look of the fabric, and you call the way it's woven satin or chiffon or whatever. That means that a satin wedding gown might be polyester or it might be silk, and you should always know from which fiber your bride's gown is made. The easiest way to tell which is which is to look at the care label. By law, every garment sold in the US is supposed to have a care label that tells you the fiber and a way to clean the garment. It doesn't have to be the only way, to clean it or even the best way to clean it. And that's another story altogether. But there absolutely should be an instruction for cleaning. Then if you use that method and the gown is damaged, the manufacturer is liable for the damage and not you. Sometimes bridal shops remove the care label. If the gown is silk, the bride probably knows it is silk because shops are very proud of silk gowns. But in order to be sure of the fiber, in a pinch, you can burn a tiny piece. If the piece beads up like a little black ball, it's an artificial fiber. When you burn silk or any other natural fiber, such as cotton or linen, it turns to ash. In an emergency, you do not want to waste time checking on the fiber of the gown. So again, be sure you know the fiber of your bride's gown from the beginning. So why should you care whether it's silk or poly? You should care because it's so easy to damage silk in a way that cannot be undone. It's just simply not reversible. A beautiful silk gown once came to me with a big blotch on the bodice. The bride had spilled salad dressing on her bodice, and the waitress wanted to be helpful. She brought club soda to the bride to put on the stain, but she rubbed so hard that she rubbed the finish from the fabric. And there was nothing could be done to bring back that luster. Poly, on the other hand, is very tough. It can stand up to almost anything without causing any harm. As an example, silk does not like water, but you can use soap and water on poly all day long without causing a problem. And I'm fond to say you could drive a truck over poly without doing much damage. As for the stains themselves, a wet side stain is one that can be dissolved in water. Coffee, tea, wine, urine, and blood are examples of wet side stains. A dry side stain is one that needs a chemical to dissolve it. Lipstick, mascara, and other greasy stains are examples of dry side stains. Salad dressing is an example of a combination stain that requires both water and a chemical to remove it. With the exception of plain water or a Janie stick, which I'll show you later, in either case, wet side or dry side stains always test that what you're going to use on an inside seam or anywhere you can find that will not show. I know I keep saying this, but it's very, very important. Then if what you were planning to use to remove the stain pulls the color, which means it causes the color of the fabric to lighten or change in some way, you'll know you cannot safely use it on the outside of the gown. You may have to settle for masking the stain with a Janie stick or the flower that you pin on the skirt or some other kind of powder until the gown can be cleaned professionally. Now, this is very important. I know that it's probably not frequent for you, but if the gown the bride is wearing is a vintage gown, very probably it has changed color over the years, and now it's a much darker color than it was when it was first worn. Water will dissolve the patina of age and leave white spots on the gown. So will many chemicals. I would not try anything at all on a vintage wedding gown at the wedding to remove a stain anywhere. After the wedding, you can discuss possible treatments with a professional dry cleaner, but anything you do at the wedding will disturb the patina, and the result will make everyone very unhappy. Safety pins and a needle and thread are about the only safe option for a vintage gown. And as I said, I realize that you're not going to often have that problem present itself, but when it does, you need to remember that the less you do, the better. And if you do nothing, that's even the best of all. Using plain water on a water-soluble stain, even if it does not pull the color, can be a problem because it may leave water spots on silk or a ring on polyester. This is a place where your steamer will help. If you place the stained area over a soft cloth and gently dab the stain with a wet Q-tip or another soft cloth that is damp until the stain is gone, then you can hold the steamer under the area and move it around until the area is dry. Sometimes you'll see a ring forming as you're doing this. Use more water to dampen the area again and continue to fog it with the steam. When the area is completely dry, there will be no water spot or ring, whether the fabric is silk or polyester. It's a nuisance. It takes a lot of time, but it is a safe way to manage the problem. Let's say the bride gets lipstick, which is a dry side stain on her silk gown. The standard list of things to have on hand includes powder and a stain remover. I suggest instead of powder that you use a Janie stick. Again, I'm not sure what you can see because there's text over. Here we go. This is a little circular tube, and it has a brush on the top. And when you open it, what comes out is a stick that looks like chalk. It's really compressed powder, but it looks like chalk. It absorbs the greasy stain. So if you rub it on the fabric where the stain is, and you can't really see this, that on the fabric, it'll turn it white. It absorbs the grease, and then you put the lid back on and use the brush to brush the powder off, and the stain goes with the powder.
Sally,
It,
what is that called again?
what?
That called again?
It's called a Janie stick,
Okay.
Janie.
Somebody asked that question.
Yeah, you can find Janie sticks for sale online. Look for JANIEBRAND, JanieBrand.com/collections. That's plural collections /all, ALL. Janie Brand collections all. And you can find the orange size, which is very small, about 2 inches high and an inch in diameter. The black one is much larger, but you absolutely cannot do any damage with a Janie stick. If you ate it, you might poop a lot, but that would be the only thing that you could actually cause a problem. And the other thing is you can use it like chalk to cover the stains it doesn't remove. So there's no need to carry both chalk and a Janie stick. It should solve both problems. Tide to go pens are a very useful stain remover as well. And for the most part, they can remove both wet side and dry side stains. But you definitely need to test before you use it. Once you start using chemicals, they can do all kinds of crazy things. So you really do need to test. Once you've determined that it's safe to use on the fabric of the gown, absorb all you can from the stain with a soft cloth and then apply the Tide to go. This should work on blood as well, but be careful not to apply heat, which will set the stain forever. There's a school of thought that says the saliva of the bride is the best thing to use to remove a blood stain from her gown that's her blood. I've never had a bride handy when I was trying to remove blood, so I really don't know if it works. But I do know that I do know that very old blood stains are impossible to remove. So it's useful to get after blood right away and not let it sit around. If you have treated a stain other than blood and there's a ring or other residue, you can try holding the steamer under the area and dab the area with a damp, soft cloth. If you remember your high school physics, heat increases the speed of the reaction. So at the same time, the steam will fog out the edges of the chemical so that it does not leave a ring on the gown. Makes it happen faster, and it also keeps from leaving a mark from the chemical. Tide sticks, much like lint rollers, can also be customized with your brand and used as a promotion. As I was getting this together, I thought about whether or not you should buy the giant size because it's less expensive or have a lot of little ones. And as I was thinking about the lint rollers and the Tide sticks, there's a lot to be said for getting little ones that your brand is on, and then you can leave them behind, and it's a form of advertising. It's a promotion that will be there for the long run. Tide also makes Tide to go wipes. You can't customize those. They come in a little packet. You know, the kind of thing that restaurants give you to wipe your hands. That's how Tide wipes are packaged. They're bleach free, and much like the stick, the wipes are made to use on fresh food and drink stains such as coffee, wine, ketchup, and other similar things. I strongly suggest that you practice at home with both the stick and the wipes. It takes experience to remove stains well without leaving a residue. And it's actually more difficult to remove stains from colored clothing, such as your personal clothing, than it is to remove stains from white gowns. So the next time you spill something on yourself, use one of these things instead of washing your clothes or taking them to the cleaners. If you're not happy with the result you get when you're practicing at home, you can hope for better luck next time and take the things to your washer or to your dry cleaner to get them back in shape. In fact, if either you or someone on your team would like some serious help with stain removal, I can recommend to you something you can find online. It's called the Ultimate A to Z Stain Removal Guide for Clothes, Carpet, and More. The Ultimate A to Z Stain Removal Guide for Clothes, Carpet, and More. Stain removal is not one of the fun things about weddings. It's like telling you that you have to do the dishes after dinner, but it is not, as they say, rocket science, and it's a very useful skill to have in your own home as well as at a wedding. So those are the things that came to my mind as I was getting this thing together. I suspect that there are, well, there's lots of things that can happen. One of my friends who was a cleaner in outside of Toronto uh, had a dress one year. The bride was getting married at the church where her friend's husband was the minister. So the friend said, I'll keep your dress so you won't have to worry about it until you come to the church and get dressed here at the church. What she didn't realize, you know, those cupboards that stand on legs. It was one of those great big cupboards on legs against a wall. And she opened the cupboard and put the dress inside the cupboard and said, that's going to be safe. That'll be fine until the bride comes to get dressed. Well, she didn't realize that she had shut the cat in the cupboard with the dress. And so the day before the wedding, she decided to go and look and see how things were going with the dress. And that's when she found that the poor cat, who had obviously had to use the dress as its litter box, had left all kinds of things on the dress. And she took it to my friend outside of Toronto, and luckily, it was a polyester. And again, you know, soap and water on polys is absolutely fine. So my friend was able to soak all of that urine and excrement out of the dress and looked like brand new. And my friend said she never knew whether the woman told her friend that had happened to the dress or she just kept it a secret. I think I would have kept it a secret. But
Um,
anyway, things
Lois,
happen.
Lois wanted to know how do you brand those items that you would leave behind, like the Tide to go?
If you Google Tide to Go and if you Google miniature lint rollers, there will come up a number of different company names, and you can search among them for which one suits you best. And some of them require that you buy a lot of them, and others not so many. So you'll have to search for the what suits you best in terms of what you can afford, in terms of how many you want to make at one time. But I do think they're a terrific way to let people know who you are, and especially in a situation with the bride at the church or wherever she's getting dressed, her bridesmaids and all those other people are going to see your name on those little sticks, and I think they're a very good way to advertise.
I don't see any other questions.
But I'm afraid that I was a little bit short, but uh, I'm curious to know what some of you have done when a skirt has gotten torn or uh, something happens to a dress. Do you try to fix it, or do you just hope that it'll go away, not bother anybody?
You all can unmute yourself if you have something to share. Tia, do you have something to share?
Trying to take myself off the mute. Hello, everyone. That was like so much information. I was trying to take my notes while she was talking and giving
Oh,
everything.
there's
I got
Lois.
so
Hi, Lois.
excited. Yeah,
Well,
I got,
I'm happy, and you can, my number is 800-501-5005,
oh, wow.
and I'm happy to have you call anytime about your problems.
Absolutely. That was really, really a lot of information. I missed the book that you had gave us. I tried to write it down, but I tried to look it real quick on Amazon. I couldn't find it. So
Which one? The one,
the
the
A to Z stain guide.
yes, yes.
So
I'll read the title to you again, just a second, because that's exactly how you find it online. It's the Ultimate A to Z Stain Removal Guide for Clothes, Carpet, and More.
That was great. Thank you again. That was a lot of good information.
Well, I'm glad. The bride, of course, is going to panic anytime something happens to her dress. And sometimes you're just going to have to gently suggest to her that, you know, people are there to share her happy day and not to look for stains and rips on her dress. That's not very comforting to her, but in many cases, it's the best thing to do rather than try to fix something on the spot. Now if it's torn right down the front of the dress, then obviously you're going to have to do something. But that's where that little micro, what did I call it? The micro stitcher comes in handy. I think that that would be very quick and very fast, and it would be reversible. You could always go back and take the stitches out again.
Can I ask one more question? I don't want to hog up all the questions. For restorals, do you recommend restorals or do you shy away from them when it's been over a certain amount of years? I don't think I heard you mention that, but if
No,
it's
I didn't talk about that because and I'm happy to talk about it, but it's something you would know about before the wedding, so it's not something you're gonna get stuck with on the wedding day. No, dresses that are very old are very manageable. In fact, I had a call this morning from somebody in Ottawa who wants to wear the dress that her grandmother and her mother have worn before her. And we have a very good member in Ottawa that I know is going to be able to remove all that discoloration from the dress and make it look like new again. And once again, it's much easier to do that if it's an artificial fiber, because artificial fibers uh, steam out very well, press very well. The problem with natural fibers is that they're hollow. And it's so much harder to get stains out of natural fibers like cotton and linen and silk because they are hollow and the stain penetrates the fiber like a dye. Whereas it's a polyester is really a lot of little plastic fibers glued together, and the plastic's solid. So when the stain lands on it, it sits up on top and it's relatively easy to remove. By the same token, when you have a really old gown, whether it's 5 years old or 50 years old, if it's poly, when it goes into the water and comes back out again, and there's a special formula for removing a chemical called sodium perborate will take that discoloration out. When you take it back out of the water, if it's a polygon, the plastic doesn't fight you. You can use a steamer, you can use an iron, and all those wrinkles will come out and the finish will be as smooth as it was 50 years ago. The problem with the hollow fiber is when it's in the restoration mix, which is water-based, it tends to bend those fibers because they're hollow, and when they bend over, they stay bent over. And the other thing they do is they slip. Fabric, as you know, has a woof and a weft. I forget what those are called, but anyway, when they're woven together, the silk, especially fibers, will slide one way or the other. And oftentimes, even if you press the dress and it's been handled so gently that you don't have terrible wrinkles, the fibers themselves will slip and the dress looks wrinkled, even if it isn't. So it's harder to do it if it's silk, but it can be done and done very successfully. And then, of course, you can also alter it to suit the modern bride as opposed to the way it was worn 50 years ago. I love doing restorations. One of the very first ones, one of the very first ones I did right after we bought our laundromat. The woman had been living with her soon-to-be husband for years, and she had like an 8-year-old, I think. And they were finally getting married, and the mother was very happy, and the mother was also very happy that she was going to wear the mother's dress. So I started out and I was very happy with the way it turned out. It was an artificial fiber. It looked great. And they came to pick up the dress and the mother was like steaming coming out of her ears. The woman had gotten pregnant again and she didn't fit in the dress anymore, which was really too bad because it was a pretty dress. Hopefully her daughter would wear it.
And one more last question. I'm sorry, y'all. It sounded like you maybe like anti-garment bags, and I did read before that garment bags really are opposed, but when you have gowns and dresses that have special beading and sequins, is there a garment bag that is safe to use?
Any garment bag that is not plastic. Don't use plastic because the plastic emits fumes that yellow the dress. Any of those those paper garment bags that are woven that they look like cloth, those are fine, and they keep the dress fine. Uh, what makes dresses yellow and look old and kind of grimy is light and air, and the garment bag will keep the dress away from light and out of the air. Is that oftentimes, excuse me, oftentimes the shop will put the dress in a bag that's really too small for the dress. And if it's hanging in that bag for any length of time, it will end up coming out looking quite crushed, wrinkled, because it's been in such a small area. And if the bride wants to keep it so that it doesn't get so squashed and need so much pressing, two fitted sheets pinned together are really super because they're great big and they can allow for a very large dress to spread out inside the two sheets. But no, garment bags are fine. Just no plastic garment bags.
Thank you. Lois, did you have a question?
I have a couple of questions. One, Sally, a number of people on the call do destination weddings. Did you touch on traveling with a dress?
Well, ideally, of course, you would buy a seat for your dress. In fact, oh gosh, what was her name? Was it Melania Trump? I can't remember. Someone famous, when she got married down in Florida, that's what the guy that was the cleaner in New York that was in charge of her dress did. He actually had an airplane seat just for the dress. But the alternative thing to do is to go on the plane and tell the people on the plane that your wedding dress is in this bag and is there a place to hang it. Sometimes the flight attendants will let you hang the dress in that area in first class where there's a place to hang things. And that again would be ideal. Failing that, about all you can do is try to put your dress in the garment bag into one of those sections in the overhead. I was coming back from Italy, and somebody was coming back from Italy as well with her wedding gown, and the stewardess had tried to hold one of those overhead compartments for her friend's wedding dress, and she couldn't do it. Somebody put stuff in it anyway, and that's very hard to do. Sometimes you can get away with that, but mostly what you're going to have to do if you're going to travel with your dress is be sure that it's stuffed with a lot of tissue so the bodice is in good condition. Put tissue where you fold the skirt, and then when you get to where you're going, take it out. Try hanging it in the bathroom and turning on the shower so that the whole room fills up with steam. And sometimes that will relax things and it's okay. Otherwise, another investment I think would be to buy a portable steamer. I know there are portables that are a lot less expensive than the E-Steam that I showed you, but they're not nearly as well made and they will break if you drop them. But she can take something like that with her and use a portable steamer to try and shake out the steam. Or what I have done many times when I had my own company, people would call me from wherever they were coming from, Seattle, Los Angeles, wherever, and say, I'm getting married in Connecticut. I need to have my dress steamed. Can you do that before the wedding? And of course I could. So that's another way to go, is to check out a reliable cleaner in the town where you're going to be married and make arrangements to have your dress pressed professionally in that particular town.
Thank you. The other question, and I know everyone has experienced this, and you described the different stains, but two of the ones that are probably the most popular that we deal with is either champagne.
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, now I can.
Two of the stains would either be champagne or, excuse me, an oil-based frosting on cake.
Okay. That really would be that's a combination stain because some of the frosting would be water soluble as well, and the butter part would be greasy. The Janie stick should help with the frosting. And as far as the champagne, if it's a poly dress, I would recommend that you use a damp washcloth and dab it until the champagne comes out, and have a steamer handy so that you can get it dry again, so she doesn't have to walk around all day with a wet spot on her. Silk is tougher. You can try the same thing with silk. Just be very careful not to rub hard because you don't want to rub the finish off. Club soda is a favorite of a lot of people for that kind of thing. And it does work pretty well. The trick there is, again, if you just use the club soda or water on a champagne stain on a silk dress, you're going to end up with a ring, a water ring, which will come out when it's dry clean, but that doesn't help you the day of the wedding. What you can do is use the portable steamer to fog out the ring. Use the water carefully to get the champagne out, and then use the steam to clear the ring that happens. With poly, you don't have to care. Poly, you can just wash it.
What about mud?
Well, mud is tough because it isn't just that you get the mud out. It's acts like a dye, and it's difficult. I would say if you're a poly, once again, soap and water on poly is probably the easiest and best thing to use on everything. With silk, I would try the club soda. I'd try some water. I would try the Janie stick, all those things very carefully. And keep your steamer handy. Just don't try to steam a blood stain. That would be a very bad thing.
This isn't a stain question, but and it's not a gown question, but it's a veil question. Gnats seem to love veiling. What can you use on veiling to keep them from being attracted to the veil?
Well, I've never tried to prevent that per se. I know what you're talking about. Ants love veils too, and spiders and everything that creeps and crawls around. I think what I might do would be to spray it with off before she puts it on her head. I'd spray it with off, shake it, let it dry. As long as if there's a headpiece with some kind of beading or fabric or whatever, I would try to keep the off away from that part of the veil, but it shouldn't hurt the net at all, because the net is going to be polyester, so it's going to be impervious to anything that's in the off. And after the wedding, you can always rinse out the veil, get rid of the off.
Thank you.
All right,
It's good to see
ladies.
you again, Lois.
Good to see you.
Any other questions before we let Sally go? All right, Cassandra, you good?
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity. It was lovely seeing you and hearing your questions and thinking about some things that I don't always think about. I had forgotten about mud, to tell you the truth.
Sally, I appreciate that. I will say good night to everyone, and thank you all for attending tonight. Our next webinar is April 2nd, and that will be with Tia Robinson, Navigating the Unexpected. So I'll see you all on April 2nd, and it's also at 7 p.m. And Sally, thank you once again. I appreciate that.
Well, it was my pleasure. If anyone wants to call me, it's 800-501-5005. I'm happy to help you with whatever problem you have.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Sally.
Good night.